One thing as a business person, and I never really, if I were a real hardcore business guy, you'd put revenue first. Okay, you got to make money. You got to blah, 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 blah. To me, I always focused on content, and whether it was forum conversations, whether it was jobs, whether it was used equipment, whether it was podcasts, video, webinars, whatever it happened to be, keep that funnel packed full of good stuff, and revenue will follow. You try to punch the revenue bag right from the start and make that your number one priority. In my instance, I don't think that would have worked. I think the more good stuff that we put out there, people would notice it, they'd watch it, they'd listen to it, they'd use it, they'd get jobs, they'd sell used equipment. And then, yeah, let's support that.
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
Well, I am excited today. It's long overdue to be hosting. I'm on the other side of the table today with Mr. Peter McCormick, longtime industry ambassador, pioneer that many people know through a variety of channels, but one most important is TurfNet. And Peter and I'll say this to kind of kick this off. When I first started the company back in 2020. Peter was one of the first people who immediately and his team really kind of latched on to help support our company. And I found that to be one, very admirable, two, unselfish, and three, now, 5 years looking back, for me, more grateful and appreciative of that, because I think a platform and people like those at TurfNet and Peter are one of those people and one of those individuals and groups and entities that really helped springboard our company and help us tell a story that continues to evolve to today, which Peter and I were just chatting about before we jumped on air. A little bit of my own internal battles of constantly thinking about things that, I probably wasn't thinking about 5 years ago. So with that being said, Peter, I appreciate you coming on today on the podcast.
I'm happy to do it. We've talked about it for quite a few years and never seemed to be able to nail it down. Get two people in the same place. It shouldn't be that difficult, but hey, here we are. So it's
Better
good.
late than never. Well, we were chatting a little bit about, Peter had mentioned about just seeing kind of how our company over 5 years, what it started with and where it's at, and is it central to the core theme. But I think there's nobody better to ask that, actually turn that back around, is TurfNet's evolution over your time. And, just want to hear from you, like how that journey has been for you and looking back on that specifically.
Well, as you said, one of the things that I noticed right away and identified with, when I saw you start your business, and I'm wondering, what the hell is he doing? What is this all about? And when I think back, okay, I had an initial idea that I ran with for quite a few years, but yet you see other opportunities and other gaps in whatever it happens to be. And it's a process where you see opportunities or you see things that need to change, maybe need to improve, maybe something doesn't exist that you think should exist. And there's a constant filtering process with that too, in that you have to decide what and how you can impact. And you certainly can't do everything, but I had no idea. Did I think initially when I started TurfNet, it was a print newsletter. The web didn't even exist. So this was early 1994. The web came on well, year and a half later, I guess. But did I know that we were going to get into, the job listings and the used equipment marketplace and webinars and video and podcasts and, that? No, because, a lot of that the technology to do that didn't exist. But yet what I've always done is sort of keep my eyes open and my ear to the ground and watch, from afar, talk to a lot of people. Our forum, for a long time, was, a way for me to listen in, talk to people, identify gaps and that kind of stuff. And, the willingness to learn, because a lot of that involved a learning curve for me. Yeah, I'm sure you you will identify with, particularly very early on, you don't have the money to hire people to do this. You say, okay, I'd like to do this, or we'd like to do that, but can you bring somebody on to do that? No. So you learn to do it yourself. And when you build something from scratch and nobody knows it better than you do. And I think in the long run, it's kind of risen up to bite me in the ass a little bit, only because I probably should have delegated, I think, more of what I do to some of the other guys. And it's a that old adage of it, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. That kind of thing. So,
What when you think about the industry and the evolution of it, what's fundamentally different, if at all, today than it was 10, 15 years ago when you started the company?
well, I started the company 32 years ago, so it's been longer than that. But um, I think it's the technical proficiency of the superintendent today, far and away above what it was, back in the mid 80s to early 90s. There's so much more at their disposal, but yet they all have to have the ability to understand, to manage that, to, again, what makes sense to apply to their specific operations. So the level of talent and education has been big. Like I say, the superintendents of today are head and shoulders above the cigar chomping, beer swilling guys from 30, 35, 40 years ago. The escalation in salaries is a big deal. I think you probably had something to do with that.
I won't take credit.
The cost of equipment has just gotten stupid. I think, $150,000 for a sprayer. And I think, looking big picture, it's great that a superintendent or director of agronomy now, which is, the title de rigueur of the upper echelon, some of these guys are making $300,000-$400,000 a year, and that's great. But that money has to come from somewhere. And I'm a little concerned about how, you couple with the cost of labor both at the superintendent level, but all the way down the line, coupled with the cost of equipment and irrigation systems, all of that, not just, equipment in the hard goods, so to speak, but, how the industry is going to, absorb that and not get priced out, if you will.
Hmm.
That to me, that's a concern. Obviously, that money's gotta come from somewhere.
Yeah. I find it interesting in the recruiting projects that we've done, and specifically with a lot of new design builds, and how those organizations are being developed, and studying that a little bit of where they're pulling memberships from. I mean, most of what I've seen in golf, and again, we probably tend to lean in on the high end private side of our engagements, right? So a little bit different than your traditional day to day, public, municipal, even low end private facilities. So a lot of those places are, membership full. And so, consequently, instead of waiting 3 to 5 years on a waiting list, we're just going to go start our own club. And, it's interesting to watch that unfold and kind of think of 5, 10 years from now, like, how does that sustain itself? 15 years, 20 years from now, how does that sustain itself? And oftentimes I find that not for not for wrong reasons, but maybe they don't know what actually they're getting into until they get into it and start seeing the costs of not just a one-time, build, but then thereafter to
Sure.
maintain and sustain that level of, product that they expect. So it's interesting from my vantage point to like see it play itself out that way. But yeah, I mean, I think of the mid-level and lower level facilities that their members or their golfer public is going to see some of these other places. It's not really rational to think that they can support an operation against, some of these other iconic clubs or best in town, best in state kind of facilities. So it's
Yeah, and the 9 holers, the daily fee, the mom and pops, whatever you wanna call them, they have to pay the same 100 grand for that fairway mower
yeah,
that these upper echelon places do, obviously that has spurned a whole, secondary market, that with the coupled with the popularity of leasing, every 3 years or so, you've got an influx of equipment that's still got, a lot of use left in it, but, it's scary, I think.
mhm. Wh- What keeps you curious, about this industry? Like, what's kept you like reinvigorated year after year, about the industry, about what you do?
Um, People, I think. I like to watch people. My, uh my, um, column, if you will, in TurfNet has been I've called it "View from the Cheap Seats" for a long time because, hey, I'm sitting up in the bleachers just watching, and that's a perspective that, um, you can see a lot of things, obviously, watch trends and patterns and, stuff like that. Um, the, and recently technology, I've never been a real geek. I mean, I bought my first PC, believe it or not, at age 38, I think, uh, a y a year before I started TurfNet. Um, and, you know, I learned how to be functionally proficient, but, I didn't, I learned HTML for the web and all that, but I'm not a hardcore coder, but yet I'm fascinated by not so much by technology for its own sake, but how it can, boots on the ground, in the grass kind of thing, how it can make a difference. And that's really just gone crazy in the last, 5 years in particular.
It's funny you say that your first computer. I'm 38, and I'm
Well, there
thinking,
you go.
yeah, well, so you'll laugh. I was just thinking, wow, how many computers have I had since like I left college? I think I'm on like the third or fourth generation of a computer, and yeah, so most of I mean, my life has been involved around technology. I mean, shoot, when I was 6, at Christmas time, I was getting a Nintendo. You know what I mean? As simple as
Sure.
thinking that. And now this generation is pretty much walking in with an iPhone. Shoot, I have my youngest daughter's 5, and I've already heard them saying, "Hey, our friends have phones. Why can't we get one?" I'm like, 5 years old has a cell phone. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother conversation, I think.
Yeah. We were talking, and again, I want to circle back to this. We were talking about what our company was and what my vision was when I started versus where it's at, and how much of that has like changed. And it's funny you say that because I do every year around this time, sort of just an annual review, and I'll look back. I keep a file from year one to year now, certainly much more refined. I think still a very big vision around talent across their workforce, across, the industry. How we deploy that probably is a lot different than what I initially envisioned. But I still think that there's elements, whether it's the apprenticeship program, our newfound scholarship program, I still like, I would tell you, I get as much passion and as excited about a conversation with students. Now that we live at State College, I kind of have direct access to the university, or some of the other programs that I do webinars with. I love doing that stuff still today, as much as I enjoy sitting in a boardroom with a search committee to help them support their agronomy team better. So,
Sure.
that what's evolved is that last piece. I probably didn't think about when I first started that this would transcend into executive level search, recruiting superintendents to other jobs. I mean, that's not really ever what I started the company on. So it's interesting, and I'm sure you felt this way too. What I find is a big challenge for me right now is the results we've had have been based upon that ground level recruiting. And so it's kind of unrecognizable. I hate to use that word, but unrecognizable to maybe a board member or somebody who's been in the club industry and thinks of executive search of just living in the executive search space. But we actually grew into the executive search space. So it's hard sometimes to categorize what do we do, because we do support all those different levels of employment. Um, so it's a challenge for me to be able to communicate and articulate very concisely about what our focus is, because our focus really has evolved.
Right. Well,
I
it
don't,
always will and always has to.
yeah, yeah, and I'm curious, when you look back, um, earlier in your career, what's a belief you held early in your career that maybe has changed, over time? Because I have my own thoughts on this for myself in 5 years.
Playing golf is fun. I
Do you mean
figured that would choke you up a little bit.
do you mean it is fun, or are you saying it's horrible?
That was an initial impression that I had, that playing golf was fun. I have since learned, for me, that it is not. Matter of fact, I haven't played golf in 25 years.
Wow.
I pretended for about 10 years, as the poser, the imposter. And well, my kids were young. I could never justify going out and spending 4, 5, 6 hours on a Saturday morning or whatever. Well, my kids are home. I could never. So I played 5 or 6 times a year, usually during superintendent outings, that kind of. It was fun. I remember my older daughter was probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 at the time, maybe 9. I don't know. And I'd be getting ready to leave the house and go into an outing. And she'd say, Dad, who are you playing with today? I said, I have no idea, but I know I'll have 3 new friends at the end of the day. And there are not too many things that you can really say that. But the last time I played, like I said, I get out and I'd spank it around for my 104, 105 strokes or whatever. And out of those, I'd get the 5 or 6 well hit ones, that feel good, sound good, fly good, all that kind of stuff. That, would bring you back again. Well, the last time I played was at a Connecticut superintendent's outing in 2000. And I'm standing on the 11th or 12th tee, and I'm opening up my 4th sleeve of balls for the day. And I said, you know what? I'm not having a hell of a lot of fun here. And so, I made a decision that you can only do so much. Certain things you cut out for. I've always been a good athlete. I was a hockey player. Hockey players are generally, good golfers. Well, it just, maybe I wasn't willing to put in the practice and stuff, which I wasn't. But I picked them up, and at the end of that round, I picked them up, and I recently sold the clubs, but they were inactive for about 25 years. But that may surprise somebody, but
that's a very interesting. So I'm laughing because I don't play that much, and I get a lot of my friends are like, you go to all these places and you're telling me you don't spend any time playing golf there. The answer is I got 2 kids at home and a wife that are waiting for me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's on a flight. It's get there, get what I got to do, and get back. So recently, I invested into a simulator in my basement. So
is that right?
Yes. I love playing golf. I really do. And by no stretch am I scratch player by any imagination, but I just love golf. I mean, I started playing when I was 6 with my father and grandfather on weekends at a local public course. High school summers was mornings getting dropped off, morning and, hanging out for lunch with all the usuals. Certainly I wasn't drinking, alcoholic beverages at the restaurant, but
right.
Kind of like a real rite of passage to some degree, as one generation shared their passion of golf down to another. I mean, there was times I'd play with people 3-4 times my age, and I was just the guy that was there, the kid that was there that they just called me in to have a game. So, but I don't play.
Both of my brothers are good golfers, but they started young. I mean, my younger brother was scratch at one point, and I think he started 4th or 5th grade. My older brother was older than that, as I remember, but I didn't pick up a golf club till I was 35, which, doesn't mean anything. But, when you grow up with, I think when you kind of jump in at an older age, it's different than when you grew up with the game as part of your life.
You had mentioned, talking about technology a little bit. And as we see all sorts of new AI coming into business and life in general, I mean, not going to lie, that's one of those shiny objects that I'm chasing right now a little bit because I just enjoy it. I like the technology. It's helpful for just our day-to-day operations, but I also see practical opportunities for that, not just within the superintendent and club industry, but kind of in life in general. But from your perspective, how do you see AI affecting the superintendent role in the next couple of years?
Well, I think it speeds up product development. I think about the selective herbicide applicators that are now using AI to identify a clover leaf compared to a grass leaf, and then apply either spray or flame or whatever it is to take that out. That's something that that is AI based. And I will admit that I'm not 100% cognizant or aware of how much of this development of new products and stuff is AI based. I suspect a lot more than I think. But you look at uh, the software applications that are available today, from moisture management to scheduling and all with the drones and the turf rad stuff, and it's mind-boggling, really. And I think making sense of all of that data is where I think will come into play, and is a big part of it.
We just to chase this a little bit further from my perspective, I I'm a part of a couple different AI groups. One here actually at Penn State University, they have an AI center for applicable, businesses, how to apply it to businesses. One from like a research side, and then I'm trying to think of what the third one is. Probably, again, more from like a research base. But what I've learned and I've been using AI in some capacity for the last, I would say, I mean, probably longer than what I actually know, but in the modern version of AI is probably more so in the last 4 years. And what I've kind of learned from it is in leveraging is it's typically not this big, like theoretical application. It's actually more on the most boring administrative type tasks that drag you from doing what you really want to do. It's not replacing human interaction, by the way. I think there's a big scare tactic on that in many ways. At least the way that we try to apply it, and I think of it, is how do I give this tool to my team so they can actually have more people interaction and less being drugged down from some of the administrative things that they're doing so they
Right.
can have connectivity. I think it's been for me, I enjoy it. For sure see an avenue here very soon that we'll be deploying that in some capacity for supporting superintendents really in the communication to their clubs, because I find that being in those executive search type situations, the superintendent role is so misunderstood, and oftentimes the superintendent doesn't really have either they're not given the space, they're not given the authority, the autonomy, or they're just the members just aren't educated enough to really understand. So I think there's still that bridge in communication, and probably always will be in some capacity. So I want to be able to help superintendents in that capacity, and that might range from everything from your compensation, being able to offer competitive wages. Sometimes it might be related to projects and getting projects passed along, but I think there's a lot of tools that superintendents can use, via AI and some of the technology that's out there to help communicate better and more effectively to their key stakeholders.
Well, let me talk about something that bothers me, if that's okay.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
And that is the demise of the blog. Blogs aren't cool anymore. They were for a while. They're not cool. And that is just a massive mistake. When Twitter came along, and is it easier to post a photo and do a 140 character tweet? Sure. Much easier. But when you've got a problem, are you going to send your club hierarchy or board, oh, go check out my Twitter feed, and you have to jump through and try to piece this together? Now, a blog, again, not cool today. Why? They're a pain in the ass to do, no doubt. But when it's a chronological documentation of not only what's going on the property, and it may be weather, it may be staffing, it may be projects, whatever it had, but you've got a chronological documentation of what you're doing. You run into a problem down the road. Oh, let's go back and look at my blog, and we'll walk through what we did and what we didn't do. Um, there are half a dozen guys today that are still doing it. Is it a pain in the neck? Yeah. AI might be able to help with that to a degree. And I think the guys that do that, there are two uh, poles, if you will, that you take Brian Steeler, who posts every day, has been doing it for years, and it might just be a weather report, might be that this is what we did, you know, and that's part of his deal. That's what he does every day. Then you get other guys that publish or post religiously once a week. And then you got other ones yet again that do it every 3 months or whenever they get a rainy day or something like that. And then obviously that's much less effective. I keep coming back to John Slade at Laurel Creek in New Jersey. He's been blogging, weekly with rare exception since I think he started in 2010 or 2011, something like that. And he said it's the most important communication tool with his membership that he has. And he's been there for 30 plus years.
Well, I think you'll love this. I'm glad you brought this up. So a few months ago, I was doing a search at Carmel Country Club in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we had a gentleman that is now the director there, Miss Chris Harriman, and that committee,
big weekly blogger, every year, every week,
followed it for years. I hate to admit that too much to get in Chris's ego, but nonetheless, the committee, before he came to his in-person interview, they already had a checklist of all the things that they were looking for that they found in Chris's blog. And so it was a lot different conversation with Chris than I would say probably the other candidates de facto, like by default, because they had a sense of who this person was, what they believed in their agronomic practices. And oh, by the way, that's what they were looking for in some capacity, right? Wasn't quite sure if the blog was going to be, implemented in the same way, but it appears that's the case because he's continued the same sort of strategy, in a public way. But I think that it has given that membership access that maybe they should have had before. Probably not a whole lot of differentiation in terms of what's being done on the golf course, but just a platform that they could go to. So, it was representative from the professional, not, people down at the bar after a mid-round afternoon.
Sure.
Scuttlebutt. So, I personally I still use a blog even on our company website because I think
absolutely.
It's important.
And they're good. Does it require a little bit of work, a little bit of thought, a little bit of planning? Yeah. But once you get used to doing it, and part of it from the superintendent level is everybody's got their phone with them, which is a great camera. Take a lot of photos. Take good photos. Don't take shit photos. Take good photos.
I'm showing you this little clip I've got here. Okay. So this is this is a little tool for anybody that's listening. It's called the Plod. And you can clip it on your phone or you can clip it on your shirt. I've got like a little, like it looks like a watch where this thing clips in on. And so as I'm going through the day and for myself, not necessarily on a call like this, but if I have thoughts that come to me, I'll push the button and it records it. And then it sends it to an AI app that populates that.
Is that right? And what's it called? A Plod?
Plod. P-L-A-U-D.
P-L-A-U-D.
Huh. There's a couple different ones that I've seen come out now. Of course, like once you buy one, then you get spammed all over Facebook and everything else to buy the different iterations of this. So they have one that'll connect to your phone. So like if you're on a phone call, you can click this and then it'll save that conversation. Obviously, you probably want to let somebody know for privacy reasons that this message or this call is being recorded. But, simple things like that is how I envision AI helping the superintendent. And for some people, what I find in the superintendent side is like the communication at times is like, how much do I communicate that it's not just fluff, And I think every club's going to be a little bit different on how they want it delivered and deployed. But I think with AI, it actually can help you stay to the point, much more concise, and summarize some of these things. So yeah, this tool is very helpful for someone like me who's
So
scatterbrained.
that's sort of a mobile notepad, if you will, that you can just use to
Correct.
record dictation throughout the day.
Correct.
That's pretty slick. I learned something today. There you go.
Yeah. Most of my interviews actually for any of our searches, our team has a tool. It's called Fathom AI. So they can just focus on the conversation and it's recording that interview and then transcribing that, into key areas that, we've created a prompt, of how we want to collect that information. But
Right.
you talk about streamlining things. So anyways, one thing that I admire and I actually really enjoy is the interviews and the conversations that you guys have had, and you even talked about it even in the community forum. So over the years, for you, from your perspective, what separates, let's talk superintendents first. What separates the great ones from the good ones?
Um, I think they're continually curious. Um, Unafraid to reinvent themselves periodically as needed. I think is huge to stay interested. Never stop learning. Um, Surround yourself. There's an old adage about surround yourself by people that are smarter than you are. Um, I I think I think back to Gordon Witteveen, who was a career. He's been dead for I don't know a dozen years now, but a great guy, Canadian superintendent in the Toronto area, and he always said that he liked to hire or keep himself surrounded by younger people who had more energy than he did, who were more curious, who had more ideas, who kept their eyes and ears open and brought something to him, you know. And he was actually one of the earliest, also that hired women, which was not always you know common back in the day, but um, yeah, I think the biggest challenge over a period of time is keeping yourself interested, and maybe that that spills down to the crew too. So maybe uh, I've seen people who say we like to improve something every year in the maintenance facility, whether it's a coat of paint, whether it's you know lighting or air conditioning. What it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but it's something that is different, uh, keeps makes people proud of the place that they work. That kind of thing.
I love to hear that because I'm laughing because I just heard a committee member say the same thing to me. It'd be nice to see every year something being done at our maintenance facility to show that they have pride. And we feel like that's where it starts. And it doesn't need to be an overhaul. Like you said, it could be lighting, it could be paint, it could be better appliances in the break room. Um, and which is what kind of led me to my next question and kind of spin off from that is where do you see the biggest gap right now, knowing that there is a big disconnect between people getting in this industry and then those that are superintendents, and there is a big skills gap, experience gap between. What do you feel is the biggest piece of that?
Um, Let me think about that just a little bit. Well, communication, obviously, is huge. You know, both up and down among your staff, but also sideways. Um, Getting to know your staff, I think, is huge so far as people retention. Um, I re- we sponsored a hockey team in the golf course hockey challenge tournament. We went to Niagara area of Ontario for 22 years doing this. And one year we had a guy who's now a superintendent. He was a spray tech or something when he first started with us. But in any case, I didn't know him. So in between games, one of these 2 days that we'd spent at this tournament, I saw him up in the restaurant. So I went over and sat down with him. And I started asking him about himself. After a while, he says, "The hell is this, an interview?" I said, "No, I think the easiest way to get to know somebody is to ask." And I think by and large, people, particularly at the lower echelons, are uh, uh, feel good when a supervisor or whatever inquires about their family or that kind of thing. And I think that goes a long way toward not only motivating your staff to get, and to get the most out of people, but also to make a happy place, a high performance place to work. I've worked at some places, obviously years and years ago now, but just had an oppressive atmosphere that started at the top. I've also worked at other places where it was jumped out of bed to go to work because it was a high performance environment that, again, started at the top and was encouraged at the top. I could tell stories all day, but I remember one time I was working for a Toro distributor and I had some pressing thing. Uh, I was working on a municipal bid or something that had to be in a couple hours, something. So I worked through lunchtime, blah, blah, blah. Owner of the company comes in, puts a brown paper bag on my desk. "Oh, what's this?" "It's a ham and cheese sandwich and a can of Coke." "I know he said, "I know you're going to miss lunch, so I bought you something." Here's a guy that, the point is that it's been 40 years or 35. I still remember that sandwich.
Mm.
Little things, doesn't have to be big, but show an interest in people and make them feel part of the team. I mean, to me, that's huge.
We we talk about we were talking about the evolution of our company, and what's my biggest probably perspective change is I am shocked. When I started this, I kind of you only know what you know. Okay. So you only have the experiences that you have. And so consequently, by default, I just think, well, that's how everybody does things because that's all I really knew. And mentorship is always something that was a part of my early career, and was really, really important to me. And not saying that I'm the best mentor, far from it, but it's always important to me, I think, as we build our company and then starting to think about, who we work with. And it really dawned on me probably 2, maybe 3 years ago when I started thinking about our best recruiting projects, not just in the moment of filling those roles, but then thereafter, those people evolving and developing. And it largely comes back to the superintendent being a great mentor and involving their people into the day-to-day things and giving them some level of insight or perspective that their word matters. And it's something that now we've changed in how we approach conversations with prospective clients is we really want to know what they're going to do for this person because we may be able to bring them in and recruit. But if there's no foundation for developing that person beyond what we bring them in outside of, hey, here's a job, here's a task, go do it. And you'll, again, rite of passage, sort of sort of deal. I think we've done a better job of really trying to help the employer think about what does that really mean? Because it is so important to today's generation. It probably has always been is to have that sort of be involved in that sort of a mentorship uh, club or environment. And that doesn't always mean that, hey, you're going to get to go to the GCSA conference. Doesn't always mean you're going to get to go do every industry activity. Largely, it's just the day to day of being involved and incorporated into, the overall mission of the department. So that's something that's my perspective has changed on that. And I feel like we are trying to do a better job of educating the employer up front and try to help them become better at that. And I think if we become better at that, then they're not really going to need us from recruiting, because word of mouth is the number one form of recruiting, is through referral.
Sure.
So it's a constant challenge though. And, on the same token, I think superintendents only have so much time in the day, and the pressures are getting higher and higher. Thinking of just how much people are participating in golf today, I think has been something that's changed.
No doubt. Well, yeah, I think that responsibility, delegating responsibility and accountability, but also using that as a learning tool. If somebody makes a mistake or something happens or the shit hits the fan or whatever, it's not the end of the world. By and large, grass grows back. But those who use that as a learning tool and involve their staff in, all right, let's figure out what happened. What can we do so it doesn't happen again? That kind of thing is very important.
If you were advising a young up and coming professional, 18, 22 year old, deciding whether to enter this industry today, what would you honestly tell them to expect?
I think it's a great industry, and I don't say that lightly. Um, it I can't imagine a better industry in which to have spent my career. I mean, obviously, I was not a practitioner. I was a cheap seats guy, but um, wonderful people, um, beautiful spaces in which to work. There are obviously there's satisfaction to be derived from producing the product that you can, but particularly from a young person's perspective, you have to be willing to move around geographically. If you want to stay within 50 miles of your hometown, it ain't gonna work for the most part. Um, you're gonna learn how to swallow your pride and take some lumps, because it's gonna happen. If Mother Nature doesn't get you, then you're gonna have an asshole somewhere on the board or whatever that's gonna get you. Um, that's developing a thick skin over time, but yet don't be impervious to those lessons that making mistakes involve, because that's obviously the failure is your best learning tool. You just have to know how to be able to get away with it, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
I make them every day. I could tell you that. You interview any.
but also learn from it. And I've always said there's so many new mistakes to make out there. Why would you make the same one twice? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think back to a recent conversation I had with a very, very prominent, long tenured superintendent. And, one of his very direct quotes was, I feel every day, if you haven't killed grass, you aren't learning, you're not engaging, and I thought that was really, it comes back to some of the fundamentals of things I remember growing up in the industry. But yeah, really, really good advice.
Well, the key there also is to not make the big mistake, not make the big visible mistake. If you're going to try something new, do it out in the hinterlands where, not on the first tee or the 18th green, that kind of thing, and, um, one of the other things that I would tell a young person is that, um, you need a supportive and understanding spouse.
Mm.
I mean, they need to know what they're getting into also. And because, this is changing, thankfully, the bit about the 80-hour work week and all that. And that's a whole nother conversation, but the one thing that probably above all else that I've tried to do over the last 30 years or whatever is to help superintendents keep one foot on the ground. And by that, I mean, don't forget your family.
Yeah.
The kids grow up so fast. You don't want to be the guy that misses all of that. And there are ways, and again, delegation, comes into it. Sharing responsibility comes into it. Everybody needs to get away for their own mental health as much as anything else, but to keep the family intact.
Yeah. I appreciate that reminder, because that is even continues even for myself to remember that sometimes those ambitious goals, they'll have their due process, but don't forget, like, you could be creating chaos behind the scenes if you're not focused on the family.
Well, and the other thing is, I think a lot of superintendents do, and I think it's critical to do, is to involve your family in your job. If they're going in on a Sunday morning to do something or another for a course tour, take your kid along or kids or whatever. I see pictures on Twitter or X or whatever the hell it is these days about, kids raking bunkers. Kids love to play in the sand. Let's show them how to rake a bunker, I think that's great. And it allows the family interaction to go beyond, okay, so there's dad or mom at work, and then here we're at home. So, mixes the two up a little bit, which I think is good.
We we in our current setup, well, first off, my girls love listening to our podcast introduction. It's like a dance party. So it's really fun on Thursday mornings. I have them when I drop them off at the bus. I let them listen to the introduction, and they're in the back just kind of moving and grooving. And so it's been a different way to try to integrate them in. They've been with me on couple visits, or if I'm flying somewhere, they'll come with me, and my wife, and kind of try to make a weekend out of something, to make it
Sure.
valuable. So we still try to incorporate when we go to the GCSA conference. They'll come to those things. Oftentimes we'll do small little things just that my wife, is involved with, with a couple of my friends. We have good friendships and relationships with them and their spouses. So yeah, it's a nice, healthy reminder. My last, well, before I jump into our little bit of lighthearted fun segment, anything else we didn't cover that thought we should touch on?
Uh, Pet peeve of mine, particularly about private clubs, is the meddling part of it. You hired a pro, not a golf pro, but a you hired a professional turf manager. Let him do his job. Unfortunately today with Google and Facebook, I call them Facebook experts. It's too easy to become a Facebook expert today. I mean, there used to be armchair quarterbacks. Well, maybe maybe it's the same thing now, but the tendency of particularly green committees who are well-intentioned, but usually fairly ignorant. Just let your superintendent do his job. But there again, the other side of that is getting back to whether the blog or whatever form that communication takes for the superintendent has to keep his people in the loop. And when that doesn't happen, that's when trouble starts. Other things, I don't know. Is there an overall or overarching lesson? Always have a plan B. You, and constantly reevaluate that. You know, what are you going to do if you lose your job? And it may be not if, it may be when. Because you know, you don't hear that much about it today, about guys getting sent down the road, you know, with arrows in their back. Happens. But if you say, well, how many superintendents lose their jobs every year? It used to be, I used to guesstimate 5%. If 5% is accurate, that should mean once every 20 years, your time is up. So, you know, prepare for that. Things change so quickly anymore. That's why, you know, it's so important to stay on top of things and keep one foot on the ground. Don't forget your family. That, you know, that kind of thing. I think that's the kind of message I would leave. And I am leaving. We didn't discuss it yet, but I'm retiring at the end of January. 32 years to the day I incorporated TurfNet on February 1st, 94. So this winds up 32 years.
Well, as somebody, you know, again, I as we're having this conversation, I'm telling you, there's like various memories coming back to me throughout my entire career. And I start with being a student at Penn State, and where do I find opportunities outside of a Penn State job fair? Where do I go? And it was TurfNet. And thinking of that, you know, each step of my career, and even as a young assistant, you know, kind of watching the job board to see what unique opportunities come open, was always sort of not necessarily that actively looking for a job, but just being able to see
Sure.
like, wow, this is really interesting that there's this type of opportunity. And then, you know, from translating that into, hey, now I'm recruiting for that opportunity. I need an assistant, I need an intern, and leveraging that opportunity. I probably was never super, I don't know why, but just never from the community board, I would always check in. I would always kind of pay attention to some of that conversation, but maybe not as an active participant. And then think of even as a superintendent looking, you know, we were talking about equipment earlier, and I believe there was one or two of used equipment vendors that I found through TurfNet, and then transition that to starting a business. And again, how selfless and supportive your company has been to helping spread our word. Maybe not always knowing where is this going, is this going to be from A to Z, and continuing to support that, man. I just want to say how much I genuinely appreciate that, and I think I probably speak for so many people. And I'll tell you the one that has been probably the most impactful for me over the last 5 years specifically are two content pieces. One would have been the Earthworks podcast, which I always listen to. And then the second one would be the Mindful Superintendent. And I would have to say the Mindful Superintendent for me was a great anchor when it was appropriate. And I think that you guys really, really shed a light on that for a lot of people. And I can speak to myself. I would never even know what the heck mindfulness is. Paul McCormick and I have developed such a great relationship, but it was really grounded in TurfNet.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that wasn't specifically us. That was, Paul participating with us and having him seeing a need in the industry. And, he approached me and said, how about if I start writing, write a blog once a month? Hey, let's do it. And he changed the industry.
He did.
Um, you know, uh, th- if there's anything I'm most proud about is that we have been agents of change, as you are. And, change isn't easy. Change is difficult. But if it's done appropriately and sensitively, um, you know, I, I, Paul certainly is one. I look at our Randy Wilson, who, has been poking fun at the industry for 25 years for us.
Yes.
And irreverently, but still semi-sensitively, I think. You know, the fact that there are a lot of things in place right now that didn't exist back in the day, that we had a large part in orchestrating. One thing as a business person, and I never really, um, if I were a real hardcore business guy, you'd put revenue first. Okay, you got to make money. You got to blah 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 blah. To me, I always focused on content, and whether it was forum conversations, whether it was jobs, whether it was used equipment, whether it was podcasts, video, um, webinars, whatever it happened to be, keep that funnel packed full of good stuff, and revenue will follow. If you try to punch the revenue bag right from the start and make that your number one priority, um, in my instance, I don't think that would have worked. I think the more good stuff that we put out there, people would notice it, they'd watch it, they'd listen to it, they'd use it, they'd get jobs, they'd sell used equipment, and then, yeah, let's support that.
This is one last. I mean, now you just opened up a can of worms, and maybe we have to have another podcast. I am going to ask this question because I think about one of the most I don't know, light bulb moments in the last 5 years for me is I met a gentleman a number of years ago. His name is Rory Vaden, and he owns a company that we work with called Brand Builders Group. He talks very similar to what you just said, is like, build the relationship before you need it, right? That's one of his mantras. So it's not about revenue in the sale. It's about building the relationship and adding value and serving that person.
Sure.
And then his other mantra that has really stuck with me is serve the person you once were, right? And so as you think about TurfNet in general and the audience that you serve, if you look at that now, what would you say that audience looks like?
Well, it runs the gamut from, um, you go to any turf club meeting, and one of my favorite little anecdotes, again, I could tell stories all day long, but it must have been 95, George Hamilton's, who's deceased now, was involved with the Penn State Turf Club, and he invited me. I lived in New Jersey at the time, and it was just a very boring 4-hour drive out to State College. He invited me to come out and speak to the turf club, which I did. Many, many years later, I was standing in our superintendent of the year lunch line at GIS, where we would, honor the 4, 5, or 6 nominees for our Superintendent of the Year award, sponsored by Syngenta at the time. But in any case, guy taps me on the shoulder. He was standing next to me in line. He says, "Do you remember me?" I said, "It's Curtis Tyrell."
Mm.
He said, "Back in '95, you came out to the TurfNet or out to the Penn State Turf Club and spoke to us." He said, "I was in the audience." So, it just goes to show that, I don't know what it goes to show, but it was an interesting experience for me. I guess my point was, if you go to any of the turf clubs and ask, where do you find a job? TurfNet, which, I take great pride in. How can you better contribute to an industry than by fostering full and complete employment?
I mean,
Now, I know I'm speaking to the choir there, but
well, I'll tell you what, man. I mean, for me, it's the it's my shot of my shot of adrenaline every day, and it's what drives you is when you hear that person on the other phone with excitement that they've landed a career opportunity. I mean, that's what gets me up every single day. And it's a shot of adrenaline that at times I need to regulate a little bit better for myself. But man, it's just when you hear that excitement, you feel like you're making an impact on somebody. There's no financial reward that
there's not. There's not.
It's that. So love that. I don't know a better way to end this podcast recording than probably that. And again, Peter, I appreciate it. Better late than never is probably the synopsis of this conversation. Yeah. And I appreciate all your time and your support over the years, and let's stay connected. I'm sure you won't be too far away.
No, well, you're doing good work, and I applaud that, and I identify with that. It's been fun watching you go, again, from an initial concept or idea, but also, branching out into the other things that you're doing and doing it first class, always putting your best foot forward out there. And that's important, image-wise, reputation-wise, brand-wise, whatever you want to call it. It's part of the deal. And that you've certainly played a role in elevating the wage structure. And made the industry a better place, which is, at the end of the day, doesn't get any better than that.
Nope. No, it's not. Well, we appreciate you coming on here. And if those want to stay connected with you post-retirement, where can they find you?
Oh my, I'll still be hanging around. You may see a video with Dave Wilbur every once in a while or whatever. And I'll still maintain my current email address, which is peter.turfnet@gmail.com. But I won't be going far. I'll be in the shadows.
Nice. Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.